Short exercise 20-6. We're going to calculate the equivalent units of production. So what we're doing here is we're starting the production cost report for just the filtration department. And remember, this is just the top part of the production cost report, so that's why it says partial. So Russia Springs produces premium bottled water. Russia Spring purchases artesian water, stores the water in large vats, and then runs the water through two processes, filtration and bottling. Now remember, we're only doing the filtration, so this is the first department. Because it's the first department, there are no units transferred in. That's why we have NA here, which means not applicable. So at the company, water is added at the beginning of the filtration process. So that's key to remember. We'll come back to that later. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. That is also super important to remember. So during February, the filtration process incurred the following costs in processing 150,000 liters. So this number is also key. We processed 150,000 liters in the filtration department. Now they give us a whole bunch of costs, but we don't need these costs. These are dollar amounts. We are only doing the equivalent units section of the production cost report. So we're only dealing with units, which is this information over here, 150,000 liters. So in this case, a unit is a liter. So we don't need dollar amounts. The dollar amounts would be done or used for the rest of the production cost report. This is only a short exercise dealing with the equivalent units. All right. Now assume that in February, 80,000 liters were completed and transferred out of the filtration department and then into the bottling department. So this number is the amount of units completed and transferred out. So we got 80,000 units. So now let's think about the cost of the direct materials. What percentage of these units, 80,000, had the direct materials applied to them? Well, remember, these units, these 80,000 units, were completed and transferred out. Since they were completed, all of them, 100% of them, had direct materials added to it, okay? And then the same for the conversion costs. Since these 80,000 units were completed, that means 100% of them, or 80,000, had all the conversion costs added to them. Okay, that part is simple enough. So on this completed and transferred out line or row, it's always the full amount. 80,000, 80,000, 80,000. All right. Now, we get to a little bit more complex part of the problem. The 70,000 liters remaining in the filtration's ending work in process. So this 70,000 means that there's 70,000 units in the ending work in process. So that means there's 70,000 units finished. So we had 80,000 finished, and at the end of the period, 70,000 were still in the process. All right. So by the way, we can take the 80,000 plus the 70,000 gives us 150,000, which is the amount that we have to account for. All right. So 70,000 are still in process. So what we had to figure out is for direct materials, how many of them had the direct materials added to them, the cost of the direct materials added to them. Well, we have to go back to this key part. Water is added at the beginning of the filtration department. Water is added at the beginning of the filtration process. So what that means is, let's look at our process. From our slides, we had like a timeline. So the timeline moves from left to right. So the units are started here in this process, the filtration department, and then they move from left to right. You can kind of think of this as a conveyor belt. And then over here, they're 100% complete. This is the end of the process. This is the beginning of the process. Now the question is, when are the direct materials, in this case water, when are they added? Are they added at the beginning? Are they added halfway through or partway through? Or are they added only at the end of the process? Well, according to this information up here, water is added at the beginning of the filtration process. So GM means direct materials. Direct materials are added here. Okay, so we get down to this piece of information. The 70,000 liters remaining are 80% of the way through. So here at the end of the process, we had 70,000 units and they are 80% complete as of February 28th. So we had to figure out what percentage of these units have had the direct materials added to them. Well, since these 70,000 units are 80% done and direct materials are added at the beginning of the process, then all of these units have had the direct material, water, added to them. So the percentage we use is 100%. So 70,000 times 100% means we've got 70,000 units with all of the direct materials added. All right, simple enough. Now let's go to conversion costs. Conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. So here's another version of our timeline. So notice I've added this purple part. Conversion costs are added evenly. So in other words, if the units were halfway done, then that means they've gotten half the conversion costs added to them. So here's our 70,000 units. They are 80% complete. And since these conversion costs are added evenly throughout, that means these 70,000 units, they are 80% complete. So we had to figure out, of these 70,000 units, that's the equivalent of how many full units have had the conversion costs added to them. Well, this is just simple arithmetic. We just take our 70,000 and we multiply it by 80%, which is 0.8, which gives us 56,000. So that means this 56,000 means that of these 70,000 units that are partially complete, they're basically, not basically, they are 80% complete. That means that's the equivalent of 56,000 units having all of the conversion costs added to them. And now we can do the math. This gives us 150,000 units for direct materials. And for conversion costs, we have 136,000. So this means equivalent unit-wise, 136,000 units had all of the conversion costs added to them, even though there's actually 150,000 units that are 80% done through the process. So the tricky part about the equivalent units portion of the production cost report is trying to figure out, of these partially completed units, how many of them had all of the costs, either direct material costs or conversion costs, added to them.